in some sectors with rules of the previous century, ignoring that there is a new economy that has been created that is totally beside this ruling. So we are competing in an unlevel playing field. And we need to acknowledge that by the definition of the relevant markets. So we are not asking for anybody else to be regulated. We are asking same service, same rule, same obligation. And we are not there. So I will finalize by saying that, it's time for Europe to decide where do we want to be 5 years, 10 years down the road. And when we decide that, when we have a common view how we want to take advantage of this massive value-creating thing that we have been creating with the single market, then we decide what's the competition policy and what the industrial policy that is according to that target. Because we are still living with targets that were imposed 30, 40 years ago, with most of this economy was not even here. So I will stop there. I think that we have a massive problem, a massive challenge, and I think that time has come, as Belén was saying, to act. I mean, if we want to change things. If we don't change things, nothing is going to happen differently.
So, Robert Habeck, do you agree there is a big problem?
It is.
And if so, do you agree in any way with the analyses that you've heard of what it is?
I agree completely that there's a problem, but I even would make the point that it's bigger than discussed until now. Okay. Maybe I can come back to your first remark, Brexit, and tell you what I think is the problem, and then all the different aspects, overregulation, this risk-averse finance tendency in Europe shows up even harder to this hard light. But the real problem is that economics, and I think the history of the World Economic Forum maybe tells the story, economics was considered as a neutral sphere, business making. And the rule of businesses is invest, earn money, invest again, and so on and so on, open borders, and no ideology, no politics interfered, and business people always asked from politicians, stay away from our sphere. This is what a Minister of Economy has to be done in the past years. Do nothing. Let us alone. Deregulate, let the market work. That was the basic idea. Do you remember the famous book of Fukuyama, End of History? That was meant not that nothing's going to happen, but that no politics, not an ideology is interfering into this globalized open sphere of economics. And this is gone. Now we live in a time, and I think it was always there, but we haven't always recognized it, where economic relations are deeply woven into the sphere of interest relations, and interest relations are power relations. And the war on Ukraine, the dependency in energy, the using energy as a weapon, but also to see how fragile our society is because we can't produce masks in the times of COVID-19, shows us that the idea that we always help each other and the flow of on-demand goods is not disrupted, never ever, has come to an end. So, and Europe, and Germany especially, or its power, relies on these open markets. Now we have a fragmented world. Brexit was one sign of it, but not the only one and not the first one. And we have to anticipate that these interest politics in economic spheres is an ongoing phenomenon. And then now we see that our own mistakes, European mistakes or hesitations or not being competitive enough, now they become a real problem because the world has changed. And this real problem can be defined and then also overcome, as you just said. So shall I give you some? No, you are not at the part where the solutions are coming, are we? No.
Not yet.
Okay.
You're going to have an opportunity to start.
I would say the real problem, the world in which we live in, is even bigger than different aspects like overregulation and lack of investments, lack of innovations, and so on and on. It's that the idea of economics has changed fundamentally in the past 15 years, I would argue, but we have seen it in the last 2.
If I understand you correctly, there is obviously lots of aspects of this. A part of it, what you're talking about, is what Belén and José María talked about, which in a sense is let me be crude about it, there are predatory competitors out there that are not playing by the rules and are better at not playing by the rules than Europe is, partly because they're united and they're huge single countries, and partly because they're very happy not to play by the rules. Is that part of, and then there's a bigger metaphysical, ideological idea, which is Europe really bought into the social market economy, as it were, which is very much embedded already in the original treaties and very much a German idea. Is that the other part of what you're thinking?
Yes, both is true. Local content rules, subsidies, like long time not seen, taking advantage of the lowest level of regulation, sometimes climate issues and so on and on. They are all part of a competitive game that we are not used to. But let me be clear, other countries, other economic spheres, they can do it. I mean, we thought of them as the cheap working bank for our products, and we earn the money. We means the Northwestern Hemisphere in a way. Of course, the Middle East, China, other countries, they have the right to prosper themselves, and they're using their advantages, as we have done before, using ours. But the question of this panel is, what is the European problem in a new economic world order? And the problem is that the arrogance with which we have thought that we don't need to do anything because everything is working to our advantage, that is gone. And now we have to work hard and to do, we have no other choice as to do our homework. The others won't do the homework the Europeans have to do.
So let's come to you, and then we get the feedback and have finish this part of the discussion. So we've made huge mistakes. I'm talking about a European. The world has changed against us. The world has changed against us. We have created very big problems for our enterprises in various ways. So what do they do now? What should the politicians be trying to do?
Mistakes is maybe the wrong word, if I may say so. Of course, let's say Germany was dependent on Russian gas. That was a mistake from our perspective today, and a huge mistake. But when this developed, mainly the Social Democrats in Germany thought that we may become to a peaceful relationship with Russia, and then we have a business relationship, and out of business it was a gas relationship. So was it a mistake at the beginning? I don't know. It's a structural change. You talked about the lack of investment. Yes, but we have a very fragmented banking sector. We have no capital market union. We have no banking union. If you look at the European banks, they are in the world scale, they are really small. They don't have the financial firepower in a competitive world. Was it a mistake? In a way, it is national arrogance to say we care only about our own small banking system. But now we are seeing the consequences. And now the state or the public money has to step in because the financial market is not powerful enough. But our financial rules are not built for such a powerful role of the state interfering in the economic sector. So you see, it's a lot of structural change and development in the political system that has to be worked off now.
If I may ask you, Velen, let's come to you here. How do you respond to what you've heard? And in particular, if you think that we are now in a competition of great states, which are essentially mercantilist powers, and the US has followed or is following China in this regard. I'm not getting into debate who started this. Is it the logical implication that a necessary condition for the success of the European economy is, and it seems implicit in what Rob was saying, is a much deeper integration of the financial system, the fiscal system, and the policy system? What do you think?
So, let me first comment on the mistakes. I think, I would call that complacency. I think for many years Europe has been very complacent, right? And, well, we are, after the pandemic and many other multi-crises, the pressure has increased, and once again, I believe that yes, definitely further integrating, having an industrial policy, an integrated industrial policy that clearly outlines and underpins the priorities, is going to be a very, very, very important step. But, you know, there is no strategy without a realistic implementation plan. And at the end, Europe is only operated through the member states. Right? And I think that this is an opportunity to launch a call for action to European political leaders to, first of all, regulate, taking into consideration the priorities of the European industry in whatever sector, right? I mean, definitely the financial services and the financial sector has to be integrated, further supported, because you said it, we have small European banks, but why is this happening? I mean, we are not going to debate specifically on this sector, but definitely because, in a way, the hyper-regulation is eventually preventing growth of that industry, as I could talk about the pharma industry, as I mentioned before. So having a clear industrial policy is important, but to me the most important is that there is more consistency between the European vision, the priority, and the alignment with the member states in order to be able to make tough choices. I mean, we have reached a time in which we need more accountability. I think dispersed accountability and not understanding who is doing what is actually getting on our way to progress. And I mean, the private sector cannot work in isolation on this. We have to really work hand in hand with government and political leaders.
Jose Maria, what do you think are the solutions, and how far are some of the questions that we've been discussing relevant, and what are the other things? Because my reading from what you say is that it doesn't need a concerted European will. I may misunderstand you, but it does need the European governments and the Commission to get out of the way. Am I understanding you correctly?
Partially correctly. I think that we need both. I mean, my point is that we love to regulate, but we need to incentivize. My point is the following. We invest 2.3% of the GDP in R&D, but in experimental R&D, which is high risk, high reward, we invest just 42% of that amount. China invests 83%. The US invests 65%. So the incentive to invest in high risk, high reward is not here. And Europe used to be the hometown of innovation. In my sector, the GSM was a European standard. The UMTS was a European standard. Neither 4G nor 5G has been a European standard. So my point is that we are addressing the money in the wrong places because we prefer to have 5 antennas in each roof rather than to innovate. There are more telecom companies in Spain than in China. It makes no sense. The definition of the relevant market is wrong. We need to reconsider that because we are ignoring, we pretend that the digital economy doesn't exist. There is a survey from the Microsoft Research Center that calculates the value for a 4-member family in the US data all along the year between $25,000 and $40,000 per year. If in Spain there was to be 10 million households of 4 members, that means that $250 or $400 billion are not scored into the GDP of my country. Where is this money? We are not part of that economy. So my point is that we need to make a reflection on where we stand and where we're going to go. And once we have decided that, then we need to reconsider the definition of relevant market, the competition policy, and how we treat those new players. Because it's not about great states, it's about great platforms. In my case, we are competing with streaming platforms. We are competing with messaging platforms. And those are totally being ignored in the definition of the relevant markets. So I think that we are ruling this world with analogical measures, and it is a digital world. And by the way, it is accelerating through AI. AI is a game changer. It's an acceleration of all those trends. So my point is that if you ask me one thing, the top of my mind, on my wish list, deregulate.
Sorry?
Deregulate us. We were regulated in Spain because we were a former copper incumbent monopoly. We'll be full fiber this year. We are no longer the incumbent, and we're certainly not a monopoly. So we should not be regulated. Let us compete. Let us compete.
Do you think that Europe should be considering the idea of a European champions in key sectors?
I think that champions at the end of the day are being created by the market. I mean, you don't create champions. The market creates champions because you are relevant. The problem that we have is that we cannot be that one because we cannot play at scale. My point is that when you have 27 regulations for the spectrum, when you don't have a harmonization of a spectrum with each country award the spectrum with different rules, I mean, it is impossible to create a single market of that. So I'm definitely for more Europe, more harmonization of Europe, and more incentives rather than regulation. And I think that lately Europe is going into that direction. I would strongly suggest to accelerate and to define where we want to be 10 years down the road. It makes no sense that there is no European company about the top 44 most advanced technologies on Earth. It makes no sense. Our market deserves more than that.
Could I just ask one question for you, Robert, which is, you talked about the financial system.
Just one example.
But it's an important example.
It is.
Now, this is the one that I looked at most closely during the crisis. And one of the reasons, perhaps the key reason, is ultimately when crisis hit, the backing for the sector came from member states because they had the fiscal resources. And actually quite a number of banks went home. They left markets in other member states because their governments would essentially only back their core business in their home country. And this is one of the key sectors, perhaps the key sector, where it's really hard to separate the sector itself from the governments that back it. And that means that you have to increase fiscal resources at the centre. This is the deposit insurance issue is one important part of that. And my impression is that generally Germany has been particularly unwilling to proceed in that sort of direction, fiscal integration of that kind. In these circumstances, do you think Germany might change its view?
I hope so. I can explain once again why I hope so. I just started explaining that we are not only talking about economic win or growth or business. This is deeply related with politics now. Like it or not, this is the case. As a European, I'd like to see the value system I truly believe in not to be pushed away out of the world order. So therefore, I agree, the answer is more Europe. We have to integrate the financial sector, but let me give you other examples. The idea the single market works was the idea of level playing field, meaning the DG competition is carefully watching that no country is doing more investments compared to its GDP than other countries. And this leads to a over-regulated form of investment strategies. It took 3 years' time to say, yes, we want to build a factory or decarbonize a factory. But the real competition is not between Spain and France or Germany and Poland or Denmark or Sweden. It's between Europe and China and the US. So the rules according to which we are acting are in a way out-fashioned. They're not fitting to the world we're living in. In the morning, third example, financial sector competition or single market. Third example, today in the morning we discussed with President Zelensky support for Ukraine. And I mean, Europe has no defense industry. We have 27 defense industries, and if we have common projects, every member state is looking very, very carefully that some part in the whatever ammunition or tanks or whatever is just done that it can only be produced in Belgium or in Luxembourg. I don't know if they have any defense industry. You see what I mean? There is no willing to cooperate. It's the national pride is we have our own defense industry. And this is, then we try to overcome it by hundreds of complicated regulations. But now to the solutions. We have seen in times of crisis that Europe can gain speed. In the energy sector, which is part of my portfolio, it was an incredible solidarity, and we have done things we have never done before, including deregulate. We have built up grids and pipeline systems and LGE platforms in weeks. Normally it takes years. We have a common purchasing platform. We have a common buyers platform for the gas market. This is all developed, was all developed over only a few days, actually. So Europe can, if it wants. And from my perspective, this is deeply, deeply necessary to be understood for the future.
I'm going to take questions now. Just be brief and to the point. I will take this lady here to the... Would you stand up? Then they can get the mic to you. I presume there is a mic? Yes. That will be help, probably. Thank you. Say who you are, yes, and the question, very brief.
I'm Veronica Nilsson. I'm the General Secretary of the Trade Union Advisory Committee to the OECD. I have a 6-words question. What can Europe learn from Bidenomics?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm going to take several. The lady next to you, please.
Bidenomics.
What can Europe learn from Bidenomics? What can Europe learn from Bidenomics? Your question.
Yes, my name is, I'm Monica Andres. I'm EVP for Yara International, EVP Europe. Very much agree on what you said. My question is how positive you are in order to achieve the integration all across Europe, and in order to face and also change this fragmentation that has led us all to the situation where we are.
Okay, and one final third in this round, I think. This gentleman, would you stand up so they can recognize you?
Yeah, my name is Patrick Kramer. I'm president of the Max Planck Society. My question is, how can Europe promote the transformation to a sustainable economy?
Okay, that's very good. I will give... I won't give you all the opportunity to answer all of them, but I can give a fair chance. Okay. Let's start with the two business people. Jose Maria, what can Europe learn from Bidenomics?
From, sorry?
Bidenomics. I think you mentioned the CHIPS Act, if I remember correctly, which was one of them, and the IRA is another. Yeah. So should Europe be doing things like that?
I think Europe is doing things like that. If you judge upon the amount of subsidies or incentives that Europe has done in the last year, is roughly 700 billion euros, which is roughly the same as in the US. My point is that are we applying the right incentives? Are we having the right incentives to apply this to a place in which we are driving something for the future? I think the US is there. We are not there yet. It's highly fragmented. Each country has its own list of interests. So in my opinion, we need to build a European agenda, and I don't think we are there yet. In this specific, I mean, I'm going to repeat myself, and I know that, but you know, in this specific area, 44 leading technologies, those are the leading technologies. It's accepted. We need to be there, and we are not. So it's not about the amount of incentive. Europe has proven that when it wants, it can act very quickly. In my opinion, is what's the agenda behind that, which is not clear for me.
Can I build on this a bit? Because, you know, incentives are not enough. If Europe's, and this is what I was referring to before when I was pointing at the misalignment between ambition and realities. If Europe is aiming to double the market share from 10 to 20% in the semiconductors materials industry, Germany is providing economic support to very important chip manufacturers, but is the agility with which the whole thing is implemented enough, right? So I think we have to really integrate all those topics, because those are not disconnected to at the end maximize the impact. Then perhaps I can build on the fragmentation topic, which
yes, very quickly.
Very quickly. You know, I would
7 minutes.
I would like to listen to the Vice Chancellor on your political perspectives, but I think definitely we need to have political leadership stepping up to deal with the country priorities, which of course are absolutely critical, but to help in Europe build that strategic foresight, which I believe is what you mean, Jose Maria, when you say, where do we want to be in 5 to 10 years? And most importantly, find the balance between driving European priorities, the 2 or 3 critical priorities that are going to raise Europe competitiveness, even if you have to make trade-offs at the member state level.
So may I ask you to comment? I mean, in some sense, all of these questions are for you.
Yeah, but I start with Bidenomics.
Yes, and sustainability.
Yes.
Sustainable economy is quite important. I'd like to add one thing which may be directly related in a way. I was thinking because Jacques Delors just died, I knew. And I mean, one can argue, leaving aside next gen, which is significant, next generation EU, the 2 great reforms, monetary union and the single market, were basically done in his time, and that's more than 30 years ago. So to an outsider, it does look that there's not just, and this is, I think, a lot of our discussion, the political stalemate problem is prior to all the other problems that we're talking about. And the fact that there hasn't been a really big institutional reform, even though everybody has been talking about these problems now for 2 decades at least, is an indication that politics is some way where it starts.
Yeah, you're right. And once again, Ukraine, we discussed today mainly military support and economic support, but they are on their way to the EU now, and everybody wants it, I hope. And the Western Balkan states are eagerly watching. They also want to be part of the EU, so we need structural reforms. If this is going to happen, this is a huge change in the structure of the EU. I think the structure we have now can't cope with that amount of new member state and a country as big as Ukraine. So time is pressing. Going back to economics, the question was, well, one question was, have we to do the same, spending billions of money for subsidies for industries as the US is doing? And actually, I think we should not. I hope not, but maybe we have to do. From my perspective, there are 2 forms of subsidies. One is good and one is not so good. The good one is sometimes we have to create markets to solve the hen and the egg problem. Let's talk about hydrogen. Everyone is talking and wants hydrogen in the 2030s, but it's not there. But we have to invest in the grid. We have to create a market for that, and that is a political job we have to do. This is a good form of subsidies, spending money into a development that is wanted by the society, maybe the governments, and in the best of all our worlds, society and government are wanting the same, but it's not there. This is the right form for subsidies. And the bad one is that we want to steal the industries from others. And the IRA is maybe also a little bit of the first one, but actually it is very aggressively directed also into the industries of other countries. And I hope that we are not doing the same, because this leads directly to the subsidy race we all want to avoid. And this brings us also to financial limits. And I can you concrete stories of companies. When I became minister in 2022 or end of 2021, that had made investments decisions in Europe, in Germany. And half a year later, they came up and say, oh, well, now there's the IRA, now we are moving to the US, except you give us million euros more. Then we stay. And then we had to pay the money, otherwise they went away. So this is not sustainable economics. But in a way, I can't let it happen. So if this is not the best of all worlds, but if I have to live and act in the grey world, then I act grey. So then I'm willing to spend the money, though I think it's wrong. So the best would be that the US and the EU, after the elections, we both have elections in this year, come together and remember that once there was a point of time where economic cooperation was of added value to both our economies. I hope we have both governments and commissions that are able to think that way.
So we've got about 45 seconds left. Does anyone want to comment, either of you want to comment on what the Vice-Chancellor's just said?
I just wanted to...
Because this issue of the subsidy race and the zero-sum nature of it, and my own concerns about Bidenomics, it seems to me a very important one. But maybe you can only start getting into the negotiation if you've got money, which is actually an issue for the US too.
I'm not advocating for bigger subsidies, not at all. I am advocating for a clear strategic roadmap in which we align on how do we make Europe more competitive. And you know, then it's only through the conversation between the public and the private sector that we will be able to see what are the financial means and resources that are necessary and where is this coming from. So once again, it's not only a matter of subsidizing growth, but it's actually aligning and making choices on what are the priorities guiding us, the public and private sector, to boost Europe's competitiveness. And we have to do this very decisively. We need to definitely do it very decisively. I mean, we cannot compete with the US in terms of financial resources at this time. I mean, Jose Maria mentioned AI. We are lagging behind, right, on something which is going to be transformative to the world. We have invested $1.7 billion in 2023 in Europe, while the US has invested. Private equity and venture capital have deployed $23 billion, right? So, you know, let's align on the strategic priorities. Let's develop the roadmap. Let's focus on implementation, because at the end it's a bit simple. It's a bit of a simplification. But the more complexity we bring to the equation, the more we are going to lag.
I knew this would happen because this is a huge subject which we're trying to cover in a very, very short time. All I would say at the moment is that what I take from this is there's an agreement that there's a very big problem. There's agreement that this very big problem has a lot to do with the structure of Europe politically and institutionally, which is and finally that it's very, very hard to change this. My response, I think you said one thing that is encouraging, which is, of course, goes all the way back to Monnet, which is Europe is built on and in crisis. And this is beginning to look like quite a serious crisis in the economic situation of Europe. So maybe one should take the optimistic view that political pressure from below to fix it will actually allow for quite radical changes. And may I finally say, I do hope we don't get into an open-ended zero-sum subsidy war across the world. I think that's going to be very unproductive.
Can I second thought that gives us some hope? Yeah?
No. I will be killed if you do, but I'm happy to be killed. So I'll give you.
Because you started with the Brexit, and when Brexit happened, there was talk about a Dexit and Italy exit or whatever. Yeah. Nothing of it happened. Yes. And I met my colleagues on the other side of the channel in Great Britain, and this is a conservative government, and I have the feeling that they are not too happy with the Brexit.
Yeah, so no, I think that's true.
Right now, they wouldn't have voted for it, I guess. There is hope. Yeah, people
well,
can
maybe
learn.
The really important point, I'd like to tell my European continental friends that we've done you an enormous favour by eliminating similar ventures by anybody else. This is probably a necessary but not sufficient condition for solving your problems.
But gives hope, actually. Okay,
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good discussion.